Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in a moment. In the meantime, feel free to hop into the chat and share your name, where you're calling in from, and what your intention is for today, what you're looking to get out of today's workshop. We'll get started in a moment, so welcome as you come in. Great. So today we are we're doing a workshop with Rabbi Iggy and Christian Straka at Shuva Center, and the workshop is called the Elusive Motivation: What Drives Us Forward or Backwards. So we're so excited. Thank you so much for being here today. If you're just hopping on, feel free to hop into the chat, share your name, where you're calling in from in the world, and what your intention is for today, what you are looking to get out of this workshop. So I'm Jess Lippman. I work with Shuva Center on putting on great programming to support people on the path of addiction recovery, and just from all walks of life who want to live a meaningful life. And I'm also a mindfulness and mindset coach and founder of the Mindful Nest. And before we get started, I'll introduce Rabbi Iggy and Christian Straka to you, who are leading this real conversation tonight. And also I'll just share quickly that throughout this talk, you're welcome to ask questions and participate and share any reflections, insights throughout. So feel free to hop into the chat and ask your questions, share any insights that arise, and Rabbi Iggy and Christian will answer as many questions and field your responses throughout as much as time permits. So you're welcome to just pop in there at any time and share. With that, I'll introduce Rabbi Iggy. So Rabbi Iggy is the founder of Shuva Center, and he's a renowned Talmud teacher, spiritual counselor, artist, and educator. And he is also the former director of spiritual counseling at Beit Shuva in Los Angeles. And we also have Christian here today. Christian Straka is the Adidas Global Mindset Coach, and he's also a Unified Mindfulness L² Coach, a member of the Mindfulness Facilitation program at UCLA's Mindfulness Awareness Research Center at the Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior. And he's a member of the International Mindfulness Teachers Association. And for the past decade, his focus has turned to mindset training for peak performance through evidence-based mindfulness skill development, which he incorporates in his function at the Global Mindset Coach for Adidas runners, as well as with his personal and corporate clients. And he also co-founded a program called Mind Size with Unified Mindfulness. So with that, we'll get into today's conversation, the elusive motivation: what drives us forward or backwards? And I'll hand it over to Rabbi Iggy.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you very much. I'm going to change role to attendee. Thanks, Jess.
See ya.
Thank you for joining us. This is very exciting because I always, this is one of those things sort of that I get asked a lot, and I think a lot about in terms of sort of life's achievements, right? Which is sort of, right, this elusive motivation, right? Sort of, I feel that throughout time and history, this question of what, not just what drives us, but how can we change perhaps what drives us, or how do we find motivation, is enormously important for not just, of course, for athletes, which is sort of the primary people that you work with, of course, but for everybody, right, who want to achieve something, who, right, from a plain person who just want to be on a diet, down to what sort of, right, the majority of people that we talk about, which is how to find motivation to make better choices for yourself, right, in recovery, right, in life. And this could be, right, lifelong, but also sometimes just like specific goals. And it is very elusive.
Yeah. You know, the challenge a lot of times for a lot of people and, you know, athletes that I work with, it comes up on a daily basis, is you have this overarching goal in terms of, this is what I want to achieve. I want to, run a marathon at this time, or I want to get this ranking in tennis, if you're talking more competitively, or maybe it's more on a recreational level, and you just say, I just want to learn, I want to be able to run a marathon. It's a big goal. So that's just kind of a thought that you either initiate, some idea that you have been inspired by, so you saw somebody do it and you resonated with it. You also want to achieve that. Or somebody said something and you're like, oh yeah, that's actually a great idea. And there's some kind of, it sticks with you, right? You're aligned with what that person has said or what you have kind of seen and experienced. It generates this intrinsic motivation in you, which is your desire to achieve just that, what you saw or heard about. However, now comes in the challenge, right? So, okay, if you think about this, achieving this goal, which is maybe a year away, half a year away to get there. Now, in that very moment, you don't really think about, and you maybe might not even be aware of, what are all of the things that are necessary in order to achieve this goal. It's not just waiting 6 months, or doing something that is kind of easy or takes very little effort. For a lot of goals in life, in sports for sure, there is significant effort required, as well as resilience and learning to deal with adversity in all of its forms, whether it's physical pain, emotional challenges, doubt, anxiety, fear, laziness, right? Sleepiness, it comes down to that. And it is up to the athlete then to consistently over and over and over accept the challenge and deal with that challenge. You can't just pretend the challenge isn't there. You can't just pretend I'm not anxious now. You can't pretend my muscles are fatigued. You can't pretend I'm sleepy or I'm not sleepy. You are sleepy. So how are you going to deal with that now and still do what you need to do in order to achieve your goal? And that's what, through the mindfulness techniques and strategies that we have developed, we teach the athletes to develop these skills that they're able to change their relationship to these challenges that they are exposed to on a daily basis in order to achieve their goal and reframe their perspective of what motivation actually is.
So it's actually fascinating because I've never heard it quite that way, and I think this is something I want to explore for a second, right? What I'm hearing, right? So right, there's the goal, right? A year or two, whatever, right? So of course we can't just like passively wait, right? So like we have to do. But what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm just like for myself hearing it for the first time, but this idea that entire challenge, right, is sort of like compressed to these daily challenges in the same way that the big challenge is. That is sort of that part of it is to see every day as that big challenge until you get there. Right?
Yes, that's very well put. That's exactly it. And that's a lot of times also, I think I heard it from a friend, but somebody asked, I think Roger Federer, if he's like a little bit sorry, for all of the other pros on the tour that kind of maybe haven't quite gotten to the level that he has, or like a lot of the other very top players. And he was like, not really, because in order to get there, it takes so much work,
Right.
so for so many years, that like the people that have put in the work, they will get there. And the people that haven't gotten there, they haven't put in the work, not for the same amount of time, not for the not the same intensity, not the same dedication. Of course, it's examples, where things just go the wrong way and you're unlucky or it's out of your hand. That happens. So luck is also a part of it. But for more often than not, it really is at the very top. You are the one who put in the time and the work.
I mean, it also requires a certain amount of talent, right? So like I can put as much work as you. I will never rank in tennis the same way, right? So like, right, there's a certain amount of talent, body physique, genetics that sort of like play in, right? So like it's so in that sense, and we'll talk about it, so like making sure that we sort of set realistic goals, right? Right, sort of especially within time frames. But um uh it feels a little right. So it feels that what we have to constantly, which I think was most people try to avoid, that means so that I'm a constantly on a daily basis uh putting myself into the pain, right? So like putting myself into this thing that's so saying like, oh no, it's gonna hurt at the end, right? So like, right, so like you practice for this long thing, but like you constantly have to put yourself in that space of uh damn, this hurts, right?
Yes, and it's also the reverse. You also have to refrain from certain activities in order to achieve your goal. You cannot go out and
Right.
stay up late. Otherwise, you're not going to be recovered enough to train the next day, even though five of your friends are waiting for you. I mean, that might not be the case at the moment, but a year
Oh,
ago.
yeah.
um, it might be that you can't eat this particular dish or you
Right.
can't eat too much of it, so as much as it is, you have to do a lot of certain things that are sometimes pleasant and a lot of times unpleasant. It's also, you cannot do a lot of things that you would enjoy very much in the moment,
Right.
and the only reason you can't do them is because it will either prohibit or at the very least make it much more difficult to achieve your goal.
So that's a lot like recovery in that sense, right? So like even though I want to drink, I want to do right, like, but I can't because it will lead me down the road that eventually I will die. But also, right, I have to, and it's funny because right, both this is the beauty, right? Both sort of the what you're saying and sort of like and how it dovetail to the work that I do with spiritual counseling and spirituality, which is the happy life, if you will, is a regimented one. That is sort of right. You have to decide ahead of time. This is what I'm doing at 6 a.m. This is what I'm not eating at 8. This is what I'm going to bed at not, at 8 p.m. I'm not going to well with my friends, right? The sort of the regimented life is the key to achieving the goals that you actually want.
Yes, I mean, for sure. It's also if you have goals that are, maybe a little bit more challenging to achieve in whatever field, it's relatively complex in regards to all of the activities that you need to do, the things that you need to train and get better at, and all of the things that you should not be doing, that if you don't plan that ahead, you can't even do it. It's just too complicated. You
Right.
can't, there's so much training you need to do. It takes so many hours, and there's a certain amount of rest you need in between, and you need to eat at certain hours. And if you just wing it, you're just gonna forget to eat once, and then
Right.
you can't train because you have no energy,
Right.
or you don't set your alarm in the morning, and you're gonna miss the training. Your body's just gonna sleep longer because you trained so hard the day before.
Right.
So having this routine is really essential
Right.
in order to turn it eventually into a habit. Once
Right.
the routine turns into a habit, it doesn't take so much effort anymore.
Right.
And then the habit, if it is a positive habit loop, then it really supports your overall goal. And if it is negative habits, well, then it really continuously undermines achieving your goal.
That sounds very lonely.
I mean,
No.
I know there's definitely a lot of people that feel like it was lonely for them. But I would say, out of my experience, that's very individual. For some people, it is. For me personally, it never felt lonely. I loved doing this as an athlete. And when I couldn't play anymore as a coach, I also enjoyed it very much. So, basically, it depends a little bit just how you tick. Like, what is it that you like and what is it that you don't like? And how does that align with your overarching goal? So there's some people that have an overarching goal, but all of the things that they like doing are not in support of the goal. And all the things that they do need to be doing to achieve the goal, they don't like doing.
Right.
And there's people that achieve that anyway, but then the journey will be a tedious one.
Right.
But then there's people that, it's not black and white, of course, that have this overarching goal, but out of the 50 different activities that you need to do to get there, actually 30 of them they really enjoy, and only 20 of them are kind of tedious. And then you're spending your time doing things that you actually enjoy, even though they might be unpleasant because they're very strenuous and so forth, or require some discipline to some time. But that's very individual, from my experience.
We have a couple questions already, right? First of all, Christian, what is your sport? I think tennis was your sport, right?
Yes, I originally came from tennis. That's what I played myself, and then I coached as a tennis coach, and then I transitioned into mental performance coaching for tennis, and then for athletes in general. And now I work with Adidas runners and other athletes, and just any kind of athlete on any level.
Right. A different question, specific, but like 2 years ago, major back surgery, so in pain most of the time. I go to the gym about 10 times a month, and I do my yoga practice about 12 times a month, and stretch every day. What do you suggest to have energy for other non-exercising activities? By the way, I'm 16 years old. Any suggestions? We can also think about it and sort of,
I mean, like generally, this is not necessarily from a mindset perspective, but like from the coaching perspective, that I've had a fair amount of back pain myself. I had a major surgery. They removed my first rib. I'm dealing with back pain for over 20 years now. That is chronic. And the number one thing you want to figure out is actually a good diagnosis. Once you have accurate diagnosis, then you need somebody who can figure out what it is exactly that you need to do to take care of the issue. Those two things are the challenges, because a lot of people say, like, this is the issue and it won't be the issue, but you really don't know. So you need a real expert, and there's not that many. So I would not, personally, I'm not just going to any back expert. I go to like the person that I can find. Once you have that, then it becomes less complicated. Then it's time and effort. So you can figure out back pain. I've seen many, many times, but of course, as always, there's exceptions, through consistent training. If you follow the regimen that is the appropriate one based on the diagnosis, I think maybe only one time have I heard of somebody that I personally know that has not been able to take care of a back issue.
Oh, that's very good. That's great. That's great advice. Different question now. That actually leads us to the next thing, right? So how do you break through the lack of motivation as barrier to achieve your goals? And even though on the other side, you feel good about the activity, right? I feel that is the quintessential, quintessential question, right? So, all right. So you have this thing, you have your routine, you have your regime, how do you then, reframe this motivation, right? And this is sort of like presumably where some of the mindfulness can come in as well, but right? So how do we do that? And also I would say, I guess we'll get to it, but like, does everybody have it? Have you ever met somebody who just can't wake that part of themselves up?
Yeah, I have. But I will say not yet. They haven't. It has not woken up.
Okay,
yet.
I like that.
Yeah?
I like that.
So generally speaking, my recommendation is always the overarching goal, and you already referred to this earlier, needs to be a realistic one. And a realistic goal should not only be a goal that you can theoretically achieve because of your physiological limitations, let's say, but also one that is not too much going against your nature. Like, okay, maybe you do enjoy making $10 million on Wall Street, but you hate sitting in front of the computer. Then that's going to be a terrible journey for you to get there, because there's no way you're not going to be sitting a lot in front of the computer, to just keep it simple, right? Or you want to run a marathon, but you hate running. I mean, not the right goal for you. When you have a goal that where certain activities are necessary that you don't enjoy, but many of them you do enjoy, that gives you the opportunity to start to work smart. You do not only want to emphasize motivation and mindfulness practice in all of the moments when things are difficult. Oh, now I have a lack of motivation, I don't want to do this. Now I'm in pain, now I have to be mindful. And now there's like this invisible association between mindfulness and attentional skills and challenges, only unpleasant experiences. But that's actually inaccurate. You can choose to pay attention to whatever you want. You can be mindful of whatever you like. So if there's certain things that you enjoy doing that are also important to get to your goal, then start to be mindful of those. Start to really pay attention to how you feel after you stretched, how relaxed you feel. And now that can create intrinsic motivation, because you're really enjoying or experiencing more fulfillment from a pleasant, relaxed physical state. So you want to use your attentional skills in a strategic way. You need to use them when shit hits the fan, so to speak, right? So mindfulness can help you reduce suffering. It's not as difficult when you need to be running, or it is difficult, but it's manageable for you. But at the same time, the 1 week later you're running, and now just run super slow, and you are not even fatigued. Now be mindful, and now pay attention to how good you feel when you're running, how beautiful the scenery is, or whatever you can pay attention to that is enjoyable for you, right? If we had more specific examples, I could also give more examples in terms of how you can pay attention, or how you can be mindful of an experience that is pleasant, and you will then increase how much fulfillment you experience. And once the weight kind of shifts, and you're not so preoccupied with only the challenges and the difficulties the whole time, but you're also very much aware and appreciative of like the pleasant experiences that come along with this, then this is a more enjoyable journey. And the more enjoyable it is for you, the more motivated you become.
That's fascinating, right? Because what I'm hearing, right, as part of the answer is, yes, if you just associate motivation with things that you don't want to do, then of course you'll dread both motivation and doing the things that you want to do. So you have to spend time creating motivation for things that you do want to do, right? And be aware of that. And then the tool does not become part of the suffering. It becomes part of the tool to use whatever motivation you need, whether good or bad, right? Whether it is difficult or not, right? So like and that's a shift, because I think for a lot of people, right, it's a little bit unfortunate. Like for us, right, for me, most people that come at my door, they've hit rock bottom. Like nobody comes to me when like life is great. Nobody's like, hey, Rabbi, can I have spiritual counseling? Life is great. Most of them be like, oh, my life is shit. Now what? Right? And part of the work is trying to find ways for them to not just sort of find ways for motivating that moment, but like, how can we create a different path? So I think that's an interesting approach also. And I don't know if that's part of it, but when you do that, right, you get a little bit distracted. All of a sudden, the pain and the motivation is suffering, right? So like, well, you'll forget a little bit about it, right? Because then you're focusing on the positive until you need it for the motivation to do things that you don't particularly want to do.
Well, I mean, that can certainly happen. And you can even train yourself to get to that point. But I was actually talking at like a more fundamental stage where you start to train to be more mindful. So you're developing these three attentional skills in moments where there's no challenges. Right. You're not demotivated. You're not in pain. You're not anxious. You're not hearing or seeing something that's unpleasant. You're in an environment that you like. And now you develop your skill to pay attention to what you want. And in this case, it's something pleasant. So you like paying attention to it. It's not even so effortful. And you just keep your attention longer there. And now you start to notice more details about this pleasant experience. And now you try to be kind of not so clingy to that pleasant experience. You just enjoy it for the time it lasts, and then you let it be there. And when the pleasant experience stops, then you just let it stop. And now you're developing these mindfulness skills. Now, when you are in a situation where there is some pleasant experience, but there's also an unpleasant experience at the same time, now you can do what you're saying, but you kind of need a little bit like you need these attentional skills already somewhat elevated, which happens through consistent systematic training of the skills. And then you will be able to use your attention in a way that you can turn your attention to. Now, there's a pleasant experience and an unpleasant experience. Right. And now, obviously, our minds have a negative implicit bias, which means they go towards the unpleasant experience much more effortlessly. But you can train your mind to do the opposite. So you're not suppressing the unpleasant experience, you leave it there, but there is a pleasant experience, and now you learn to pay attention to it. That takes more effort because your mind gets pulled here the whole time, but you just retrain it to go over there. And over time, what you just said will happen where it seems like this is not even there anymore. Even though it is there, you just don't see it or you don't experience because you're so merging with the pleasant experience, so to speak.
Right. How do you suggest people start, right? Like, what do you have a suggestion of, like, how do you even begin, right? So like part of your work is kind of, I would say, right, demystifying mindfulness, right? A little bit.
Yes.
So like, how do you start with that? Like, what would you suggest to people if they're like, mindfulness, what's that?
Yeah. I mean, basically mindfulness, I think there's so many ways to talk about it, right? But mindfulness is one way to become happy independent of your experiences. You can be anxious and sad, and you can be kind of happy, even though that's an experience you're having. So you will reduce suffering, you will increase fulfillment, you will understand yourself better. You will be acting in a way that's more beneficial to your goals and not so detrimental to your goals. And you will actually also be able to be more of service to others in many fields. Those are kind of the fields that this practice, developing these skills, kind of affect. And you can tailor the practice in a way that reducing suffering or increasing fulfillment kind of are highlighted, depending on the techniques that you practice. So the first thing that I recommend that makes things really easy is a little bit of work up front, but finding a teacher that when that person talks, it just clicks for you. They speak your language. Once you find that, a whole world will open up. And there's many of those people that speak like you, but it might be the case that you just haven't heard anybody yet that speaks in a way where you're like, oh yeah, that's, of course, like I understand that, right? They kind of speak your language, so to speak. That's one very helpful way. If that happens to you, if you're interested in doing a little research, then just check out influential mindfulness coaches, and there is a good amount of them there. And actually, not just mindfulness coaches, there's spiritual coaches, right? In all religious traditions, honestly, for me, it's like all the same. Everybody is kind of working on these skills, whether it's religious or it's secular. We just all want to be happy, and there's these skills that you develop.
Right.
So, and then apart from that, you kind of you can say you have two different routes. One route is you just like dive into it. You don't try to understand it a lot. You don't try to get the intellectual concept. You just start to practice. And there's many ways. You can get an app, from Calm to Headspace to Bright Mind to 10% Happier to whatever. They all do the same thing. Any mindfulness app, if it's a good one, will teach you these same skills through all of these different techniques. But all the techniques teach you the same underlying skills. So it doesn't matter really which technique you practice in the end, actually. That's one way. And then once these skills develop over time, because you're practicing, that's the essence of everything, you will experience the change yourself. It's experiential change. It's not an intellectual change necessarily. The other way is that you want to understand what this is. Like, how does it work? Why should I do it? And I want to be able to tailor techniques myself. I don't want to just follow what somebody else is saying. Then you go more around like Mind Size, what I'm doing, which focuses on athletes, or Unified Mindfulness, which focuses on everything that Mind Size focuses, as long as it's not sport. So developing these three fundamental skills. And then you really develop your own foundational skills that will allow you to incorporate mindfulness into your life.
What in that sense, right? What do you think people get wrong about mindfulness? Like, what are the things you think people sort of like don't get?
So the first big one is, if you're mindful, you don't think. I think that's a big one. That is definitely not the case. It's rather than you will stop to think, or if you do it right, you don't think. Actually, you reframe that into, you change your relationship to what you think. So you can be thinking whatever, you can be thinking, I don't want to go for a run right now. And that thought will not be so powerful anymore. You can now go for a run because you know, oh, this is good for me. I need to go for a run because I want to achieve my goal. But if you're very identified with the thought, or you only can work with your mind if there is no thought, then that's a challenge. There's a real strong connection between what's going through your mind and what you believe. And the second big one is that you practice mindfulness in a lotus position with your eyes closed. I can tell you, I don't do that. Never have. I can't sit in a lotus position. So the whole mind size concept
Like,
is based on actually practicing mindfulness while you're doing sport. So, it's really the exact opposite of what a lot of people would think of practicing mindfulness.
so you can do right. So in that sense, right, that mindfulness is not the sort of this cockamamie idea of like that sort of you sit somewhere in a lotus spot and it's really nice and quiet and you clear your mind and right, the thing sort of the people think that's mindfulness, right? It's nonsense. It's the other way around, right? So that the sort of mindfulness is actually about observing your mind, and also it is part of an active presence rather than sort of this sort of sitting in robes somewhere on the top of a mountain, right?
Yes, that's a very good way of putting it. It's an actively non-doing
Right.
because you're doing something with your mind, but
Right.
not with your body. But you can do something with your body. So whether you're sitting with your eyes closed in a lotus position, or you're running a marathon, or you're playing tennis, or we're talking right now, you can always use these skills. And using these skills, that's the activity.
Right.
And the non-doing part just refers to your physical body.
Right.
So, of course, I sometimes go to the beach and sit there with my eyes closed, but it's not like I clear my mind, there's no thoughts, and I'm just in pure cessation. I turn my attention to the pleasant sound of the waves,
Right.
or I start to pay attention to how the wind feels on my skin.
Right.
Or I do turn my attention to my mind, and I notice, oh, there's a thought on repeat, or there's a thought and now there's a little pause, and there's a thought, or to how I feel emotionally or physically.
Right.
So, that's where different techniques and strategies come into play. What are you paying attention to? One thing, multiple things, and in what way? But that's kind of the activity. You use these attentional skills, you pay attention to what you want, whatever that is, for however long. And now you try to notice details about what you're paying attention to. Is it loud? Is it silent? Where is it? Is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? And then whatever it is that you are experiencing, you try to allow it exactly the way it is. If something wants to intensify, the wave becomes louder, you let it become louder. If there is something that's static and you have just like this knot inside of your solar plexus, you let it stay there as long as it wants. You don't want to have an antagonistic relationship with your experience. And once you are at peace with your own experience, then life is not so back and forth anymore. You're kind of like more swimming through the waves. But there's always waves. It's not going to be flat lake water.
I feel that I think that's very, very important, because I think what a lot of people face, especially right again in recovery or mental health issues, right, is that struggle, right? That sort of, right, one compares oneself to a either high performance or even more like to a normal, right? The sort of like, right, I shouldn't be feeling this, I shouldn't be thinking this, why am I feeling, right? So that we focus on this sort of tension, right, almost war between what we're feeling and what we think we should be feeling or being at and whatever. And I think what you just said is enormously important, right? To say like, can we observe something without judgmentalism, right? Can we observe what we're going through, and can we allow ourselves to be in that, right? Can we allow us to be, no, right now I am sleepy, or I am tired, or in pain, or lack of even lack of motivation. I don't want to do something, and to sort of like to observe it, like, why do I not want to do this, right? And once you're in that space of being able to hear yourself, you are less inclined to fight with yourself, right?
Well,
Right,
it's
I think people
also this, uh, you know, I was living for the longest time under the illusion that like I have some kind of power over how I feel or I don't feel, or I have some kind of power over what's going through my mind. Uh, that's not the case, you know. Of course, it is true that my behavior, my activities influence how I will feel in the future, what will be going through my mind in the future. Of course, that there's always a correlation between what I do and what I will experience.
right,
But there's absolutely, I have zero power over when I hear somebody say something and then I feel angry. Like if I could choose to not feel angry, I would definitely always choose to not feel angry.
right.
And because a lot of people don't realize that that's actually not a choice they have, they feel like they should be able to not do that. Now there's like this issue, like why can I not be motivated right now? I should be motivated and I'm not motivated. There's something wrong with me.
So, but that's the key, right? That thing of like, I should be motivated, what's wrong with me,
Yeah,
right? That judgmental part of ourselves that doesn't allow us to sort of to be, right?
exactly. Exactly. So not being motivated is totally normal.
Right.
I'm not motivated all the time. I get up at morning, every morning at 6 o'clock. I drink a coffee. I do 20 minutes of hyperventilating where I sit there like,
Right.
and that's not pleasant. And then I meditate and then I work out for 60 minutes and my heart rate goes to 200 and that's not pleasant.
Right.
So it's not like I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh yeah, I want to work out. Like I'm looking forward to that. Um, but because doing that over time makes me feel so good eventually that now there is like this association in my mind that, oh, if I do this, like I'm going to feel better. So now I'm actually already feeling better and motivated because I just know what's going to happen.
Right.
But that's because I went through the cycle.
Is there a way to sort of, to, when you say to yourself, okay, now I've observed that I don't want to do it, to then find a reserve that is okay, I would, right? Can you spark motivation?
Well, I mean, there's at least two ways. The one way is what most people just go about, which is you will yourself through it. You know, you are not motivated, you don't want to do it. Intellectually, you understand it's good for you, and you just gonna do it anyway. You just go with your head through the
Right.
wall. And that is necessary sometimes, for sure.
Right.
Um, the other way is to realize what lack of motivation actually is, what it consists of, right? What it looks like, and not to be so impacted by it as if it would be like this big wall that I cannot overcome. I'm not motivated. Well, what is lack of motivation? Lack of motivation is basically an absence of a certain feeling in the body, right? You, whatever that feeling you want to describe, you are like, you're not excited, you're not feeling excited, or you're not feeling good or happy about that activity. So there's either like no feeling in the body, or there's even some aversion towards it. You're feeling averse to it. So there's no desire to do that. And now also you might have a lack of motivation in your mind. So there might be thoughts like, I don't want to do this. This is going to be so hard again.
Right.
And of course, how you feel and what you're thinking. And that could be auditory thoughts, like what I just said, like you're talking to yourself, but it could be also visual thoughts. You're just like seeing yourself in a situation that you don't want to be in. And now you just have like this, pinball machine happening inside of you, where one is kind of activating the other, and like the worse you feel, the more you're thinking you don't want it, the more you're thinking this, the less you feel like you want to do it. And the way you kind of can snap out of that is by realizing that, like, oh, that's just a sensation. I'm not really a slave to how I feel. My behavior is not a slave to how I feel, or my behavior is not a slave to what's going through my mind. I can have a thought that is somewhere in the realm of, I don't want to do this, like this is crazy, and I don't feel so motivated. And I don't really have a big issue with that thought and with that feeling. And then I do it anyway. I don't need to kind of always pair feeling something unpleasant, having an unpleasant thought in my mind with my next activity. Right. Those can be separated.
Right. Right. There's a question, is mindfulness not somatic? Something you can use in somatic activities, in all activities, passive or aggressive?
Well, I mean, mindfulness is using 3 attentional skills at the same time intentionally. So the ability to pay attention to what you want, we describe that as concentration. Your ability to notice in real time what's happening, so to be aware, so to speak, right? Is the second skill. And your ability to not be fighting with your experience, whether external or internal, right? Not fighting with feeling unmotivated, not clinging to having the urge to do something, but allowing the urge to be there and not following through with it necessarily.
Got it.
So when you use these 3 skills intentionally, simultaneously, then you are being mindful. You can be mindful for a second, you can be mindful for a minute or 10 hours, right? If you train enough.
Right.
So when you're saying, is it not somatic? So mindfulness is not somatic because you're not, doing something with your body. However, you can direct your attention to a somatic experience. So you are now experiencing, you're directing your attention, let's say, to your hand. And now I am feeling my hand. So now I'm just experiencing the somatic sensation of my hand. I can notice that there's a little tingling going on. I can notice that there's a little air going through the fingers. So now I'm experiencing in real time somatic sensations, right? And you can direct your attention to something you feel, somatic, whether that is physical or emotional in nature. You can direct your attention to your mental states. You can direct your attention to visual experiences externally, auditory experiences externally, and you can turn it to something you can smell and taste. So in other words, to everything.
So you said, so the 3, right? So the first one you called
concentration.
The second one,
clarity.
And the third one?
The third one, in sports and mind size, I call it coolness. Cool. So you're just cool with not being cool, right? You're cool with having the urge to do this. You're cool with
Right.
not
So
wanting to do that. Traditionally, it would be called equanimity or acceptance, openness.
it's funny because I would call it observance, just to observe it, right? So like just to sort of the skill of just looking at,
Yes.
right?
Well, in mindfulness, observing it would be falling into the second skill, which is clarity.
Clarity.
So you're experiencing in real time what you are uh, noticing, what you're observing it. It's a somatic sensation, right? So you're feeling, or you're observing something visually, or you are experiencing something auditory.
Right.
So being really present with it, that would be sensory clarity,
Right.
or it would fall into that category.
Right. Interesting. And I think that, right, that could be very helpful for somebody, right? When they're having some lack of motivation or anxiety, whatever it is, to say like, right, what is the concentration? What is the clarity? What is the equanimity or the
Mhm.
coolness of it?
Yes.
Right there.
And they reinforce each other. So
Right.
the better you can observe your experience, the easier it is to stay cool with it.
Right.
And the cooler you are, the easier it is to pay attention to it and observe it.
Right. So let me ask you, shifting a little bit, right? Because most of your work, which is fascinating to me, works with athletes. Presumably, right, athletes, right, if they get to Adidas running or whatever, right, they already know, right, that they need to work hard, train hard, right? So like do like right there, right? So what how do you work with them, right? Presumably they already have the motivation. They're athletes, for God's sake, right? How does mindfulness then sort of help them, if at all? And do are there people who be like, you know what, I know how to run or play, I don't need your mindfulness nonsense,
Yes.
right? Like, right, so like,
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of people that don't feel like they need it, right?
right,
Sometimes that really is because they don't need it. Sometimes it's just like a misconception about what they think that mindfulness is,
no,
right?
for sure. I mean, I was
Not
talking,
realizing that they're already mindful, but they're in a good place in their life, and maybe they don't yet or never
right,
will be really in the place where they will be suffering so much that this will be kind of a necessity for them.
right,
However, when it comes to athletes, um, that's just a description. It's still just a human being that has all of the challenges that all of us have. I mean, you know, a lot of people turn to sports because they overcame certain challenges or they're having certain challenges, and it's like an escape tunnel for them.
huh,
There is 10 million reasons, why people do sports. So when we talk about athletes, is us doing a sport. It's not like a person that has this crazy motivation. I mean, they just want to do this, but why do they want to do it? Maybe they want to do it because they listen to us. Maybe they want to do it because they drank too much. Maybe they want to do it because they got inspired by somebody. I mean, there's so many different reasons why people all of a sudden feel like, oh, I want to do this, or I want to try it out. They become a little curious.
right,
So it's really exactly what we're doing here right now on one level. And then the other level is that I, like you said before, like I just make it clear to them that on the one side, they can do these exercises and practice these mental skills without having to dedicate extra time. You do not have to, sit in the morning for 30 minutes in silence, and then you're like, I don't have any time. Now I need to do 30 minutes of extra sitting to do nothing to clear my mind, and I can't clear my mind. So like we take that off the table. You don't have to clear your mind, and you don't have to sit and do nothing. You want to run, go run. But when you run, now you also do X, Y, and Z. So turn your attention to how you're feeling right now when you're running. Are you tense when you're running? Or turn your attention to the technique. Your running coach told you to sway your arms. So are you noticing that, right? So we teach the people that do sport how to use this concentration, clarity, and coolness while they are working out.
uh-huh,
And very, very quickly, they realize that using these skills, number one, is not something new to them. They use these skills all the time already. Just one of the big differences is that they were using these skills sporadically by coincidence, so to speak. And now they're using them intentionally in a systematic way. There's like a method to it all of a sudden. But it's not like some skills that they never had before. Everybody can direct their attention to something. Everybody can notice that when they breathe in, their chest expands. You have that skill, that's clarity, right? And once they are able to notice that this is not something, that is kind of otherworldly, something that is just very kind of realistic, like right here, right now, this is what I can do. They also notice that it actually optimizes their performance. Because what could optimize your performance more than if you pay attention to what you are doing and not be fighting with what you're doing? That is kind of the essence of being in a flow state, right? In order to really let your body and mind work in the most efficient way, you need to fully be immersed with your activity. And that can be, you might need to have to direct your attention to many different things, but it still all has to do with your activity. And you can never become too antagonistic to the relationship, no matter if it's pleasant or unpleasant. If you get too clingy about winning, you get afraid, you get anxious, you lose. If somebody makes a bad call and you get upset about that, your attention is now on that and not anymore on what you need to be doing. So experientially, without even explaining it to them, they're like, oh, now I'm running much faster. Now, like, I'm much more relaxed. So they're experiencing the optimizing of their performance, so to speak.
Right. I love that, because again, I think for everybody who's listening from the recovery world, is if we focus on the not drinking, or if we focus on the failure, on the relapse, or if we focus on what my mother said or the sponsor, right, then we shift our attention to the motivation to be better, to grow, right, and it takes away that certain energy away from us, and we have to sort of go through it, right? Is that, I mean, I think I know the answer, but like, is that counter or works with being in the zone, right? Is that so, like, right? Because many times athletes or people, when you do something, artists feel like when they're in the zone, they're not thinking, right? They're just doing the thing. They've trained their muscles and their bodies to do the thing. Is calling it all of a sudden looking at my legs, all of a sudden I can feel the pain, or right? So does it go against the zone, or is
being
it
in the zone is by this guy Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, is like this defined 8 different parameters that if those are active, then you're in the zone, okay, or in the flow state, so to speak. So it's his definition, and I would agree that a lot of people that are would describe a flow state as like, this is what they're kind of experiencing.
Right.
In another way, you can look at the exact same thing and just say, okay, like, definitely if you're in the flow state, you're not like non-active. You're doing something, right? Otherwise, it would be more like a trance, maybe. You could be in a trance and not be doing anything, but you can't be in a flow state and not be doing anything. So then it wouldn't be flow. But when it comes to concentration, clarity, and coolness, when you're in flow, that means that these 3 skills are significantly elevated, meaning you are effortlessly be able to pay attention to what is most important for your activity. Without you're trying to direct your attention is going there by itself. Then you are very, very observant, as you called it. You're very aware of what's happening. It's crystal clear. It's like a magnifying glass, so to speak. And there is absolutely zero resistance to the experience. You are one with the experience. You and the experience are not 2 anymore. It's kind of 1. So there is no fighting with it. So it's not just these three skills, but if you are in flow, then your concentration, clarity, and coolness for that time being are significantly elevated. And therefore, if you are practicing these three skills, which are the mindfulness skills, intentionally and systematically, you actually significantly improve your likelihood of entering a flow state and also staying there for longer.
Fascinating. We have just a few minutes. Um, do you think, or I guess, what would you suggest to people to, um, after they find somebody, like we said, but how do you then tell people, okay, what is the first step? Right after, let's say they heard somebody, they have the app, like, but what is the first step? If somebody just heard us and be like, okay, I want to experience mindfulness, is there something they can take right after this and go and say to myself, okay, this is my first step of mindfulness?
Yes, definitely. You can just go, I mean, go on my Instagram, there's guided meditations. You could go on there, it's free, or on my Facebook page, just as an example, and there's other teachers also.
Right.
And you just listen to a guided meditation. Listening to a guided meditation and following the instructions
Right.
means you are practicing mindfulness.
Got it.
So the very first instance, and really the most important of everything, is practicing. This is a practice. You can understand everything to the degree of a PhD, and you can write 5,000 pages about it. If you don't practice it, you can't be improving your mindfulness. It's like
that.
you can write a thesis about running a marathon, but if you don't run ever, you will not be able to run the marathon. So for mindfulness, it's the same. It's helpful to understand what you need to do, but you need to do it. If you're not doing it, it's not going to change anything. But the understanding it might be getting rid of some confusion or doubt. It might help you become more motivated because you realize, oh, I don't have to do this only while sitting. I can do it while I'm listening to music. Oh, then I would do it. I love listening to music. Or, oh, I can do this while I'm having lunch. Yeah, totally. You can do it while having lunch. So that's why intellectualizing this, of course, is also beneficial because it kind of helps you understand what this really is and what it isn't.
I love that. And that's a great thing, right? So just put it in the chat, but just right, if you go on Instagram.com, Straka, STRAKA.LA, you'll find these meditations. And I love that, right? So like the two things, one, just find a meditation, sort of, meditation that sort of to listen and to practice. Two, that like everything in life and recovery, it's practice. You have to do it. It's not enough to talk about it or think about it. You have to, it's a discipline. Right, you have to do it. And then lastly, I love even more, right, you can do it with something else, right? It's, again, not finding a quiet spot somewhere on the Ganges River. You can do it while you're having lunch, while you're listening to music, while you're doodling, making art, whatever it is. You can sort of practice mindfulness. And I would say to people, so, when was the last time you practiced some mindfulness at a meeting? Right, of how people are talking, what they are, what you feel, the chair, the smell, right? So like the allowing to in. So again, taking those three things with us. Christian, thank you so much for this hour. This has been really fascinating for me, and I'm sure for others. And now that people also know how to find you, thank you again. This has been hugely educational for me. I appreciate it. As we say, Shabbat Shalom. Right.
Shabbat Shalom. It was very enjoyable for me also. Thank you so much for having me on.
Excellent. For everybody else, for the last minute, we have right, Pop-Up Shabbat comes up next Friday. You can go on our website, tshuvacenter.org, and sign up for Pop-Up Shabbat. Again, if you're interested, if an AA meeting, a rock and roll concert, and some Jewish liturgy had this big orgy and had a child, Pop-Up Shabbat is that child. So come and join us. Also, I don't know, do you know Dave Smith, the Dharma teacher? So Dave Smith is going to be on, Dave Smith is going to be with us on Tuesday on Instagram live at 12 o'clock Eastern time. So we're going to have some time to talk about a little bit about Dharma and Dharma teaching, and again, inner strength. And all groups, of course, at Tshuva Center at the menu on our website. and the website. And again, like I said this morning, the podcast, it was with Marcus Rogan, who is an Olympian, a swimmer, and we talk a very similar conversation about motivation, athleticism, and how to observe ourselves and how to become better at life. So, Christian, thank you again. Thank you, everybody who joined us. All the things that I just mentioned are in the chat, as Jess wrote us. Thank you, Jess, for introducing us. Everybody, have a great weekend. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.